Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. Last night we talked about the insiders. Tonight we're going to start with the super citizens on page 111 of Nathan Hare's book, The Black Anglo-Saxon.
Greetings. My name is the Revolutionary Matron, and my show is called The Learning Curve. I broadcast on a network called KWAZ Radio. There are other hosts on the network I'd like you to meet.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed here belong solely to the respondents, and they do not necessarily reflect any broadcast networks, affiliates, nor sponsors. The Learning Curve is a broadcast created for the benefit of my global community. Black is a consciousness. Content is being used for our commentary, research, criticism, education, scholarship, teaching, preaching, and news reporting. No copyright infringement is intended. I will make enunciation mistakes. I will give you my opinion about the information. And if you ever ask, I will send you my source.
Greetings to you, Anthony McPhail, and to the rest of you in the chat. Happy Juneteenth to you as well. The super citizens. The Black Anglo-Saxon super citizen is more conservative in most respects than his white counterpart. Being denied first-class American citizenship, he becomes instead a super American, striving for white acceptance by a conspicuous and exaggerated display of loyalty and patriotism. In their occupational lives, super citizens generally work in subordinate, often subservient capacities. Because the Negro is barred from large-scale business, even high-class super citizens work in service fields such as nurses, physicians, undertakers, teachers, life insurance salesmen, government clerks, social workers, and government appointees. As professional public servants, peddlers of property and piety, they must please the public, mainly the white public. Accordingly, many develop an insouciant attitude as a defense mechanism. I just don't let their status, bother me. They will declare in an effort to convince themselves as well as the listener. They affirm that you've got to be realistic, meaning you must accept the slow pace of Negro advancement as inevitable. Greetings, Forecast. Thanks for tuning in. Because the super citizen has not yet been accorded the full rights of citizenship, he is fearful of being thought rebellious or un-American. Thus, he speaks of extremists on both sides. Denouncing militant Negroes as extremists, those whose behavior he deems improper are labeled as troublemakers or un-American. When there was a riot at a Thanksgiving Day football game in Washington, D.C., caused by mobs of young whites and Negroes, which is an annual occurrence in many localities among crowds of any color, both a leading politician, political figure, and a journalist called the Negro teenagers involved un-American. Similarly, a display of militancy on the part of an adult Negro will call forth the accusation that he has set the race back 50 years in their effort to be accepted and catch up with modern white society. The super citizen insists, I'm not a Negro, I'm an American, when referred to as American Negroes rather than Negro Americans. They are offended, although they would prefer to omit Negro entirely. I'm an American first and a Negro second, often they exclaim. In fact, the super citizen is not even secondly a Negro. His state and his residence are also placed before his race in his scheme of identities, such as clubs. At such clubs as the Sons of North Carolina, many super citizens assemble, holding cocktail parties to meet successful ex-residents of their city or state. Such individuals are hailed, for example, as favorite sons of Alabama, even when they are second-class citizens in their own state. When the Association for the Study of Negro Life recently launched a fundraising drive for the Carter G. Woodson Building Program, Negroes were sold Proud American buttons. The fact that there were no Proud Negro buttons is a testimony to the association's knowledge of the super citizen mentality. This pseudo-nationalism, not to be confused with genuine loyalty to one's native land, is the product of the super citizen's endeavor to cover up his racial identity with an exaggerated sense of national identity. So they're hiding. One super citizen, writing in her column, Travel, which appears in a National Negro Weekly, stated, "We, as in Americans, have insulted the French nation. True, we are only being what we are, Americans." She then advised that we should mend our ways as the representatives of the world's leading power. At a golden anniversary celebration in Los Angeles, the former national president of a leading sorority of super citizens challenged the members to forget selfish and narrow interests and become concerned with the interests of our country and all right-thinking Americans. So they wanted them to put everything else to the side and adopt Americanism. Now and again, super citizens are impelled to ceremonialize or conspicuously exhibit their Americanism. While abroad in Europe, they miss Cokes and hot dogs and kindred symbols of Americanism. Those employed in any government capacity, however lowly, will announce that they work for the Pentagon or a like agency. In their relationships with Africans and other foreigners, their super citizenship is also apparent. For example, the super citizen will express his pride when white segregationists who work in restaurants near the nation's capital are compelled to serve African dignitaries. He will hastily add, even though I am not a foreigner, as in an African, I'm just an American. Their overt and exaggerated reverence for America gives them a corresponding sense of being revered and accepted by America. One female super citizen confessed, "The Star-Spangled Banner makes me cry. It used to make me rather uncomfortable and embarrassed. More and more, however, it chokes me up until now it just puts knots in my stomach, clouds in my eyes, and sends the tears to flying. Super citizens will proudly proclaim the glories of democracy, blind to their own inglorious positions. Every man in the street, white, black, red, or yellow, knows that this is the land of the free, the land of opportunity, the land of equality of all men. One wrote in a weekly newspaper. Another said, please don't misunderstand, but I find myself thinking, thank God for slavery. It got me out of this, which was Africa, and made me what I am instead. They unashamedly ridiculed the fledgling democracies in African countries, expounding and deliberating on the prospects for democracy there. However, when a select group of super citizens got together to honor the centennial of the Emancipation Proclamation and applaud a century of progress, a visiting African leader invited them to come to Nigeria and see real democracy with no color problem. Greetings, KW97. Thanks for tuning in. The forecast says, oh, he would have been mad when they was kneeling too. Absolutely. The super citizen would have been mad when we were kneeling for the flag. Although none of them accepted the invitation, many super citizens do a journey from continent to continent as self-appointed guardians of America. They urge Negroes to go easy in their struggle for civil rights because news of Negro discontent might hurt our image abroad or make America lose prestige. One group sent a telegram to President Kennedy with the message that integration leaders were dividing our country faster than agents of foreign powers could possibly do. Others criticized the late president for hasty progress because it hurts the morale of this country. They even answer Negro complaints with the old, why don't you leave the country if you're so dissatisfied? To offset the harm done America by Negro demands for equality and opportunity, super citizens will go on goodwill missions. Whether they go as private citizens or as official representatives of the government, they seek to deny or minimize the existence of racial discrimination in the United States. On one such unofficial goodwill tour, 50 members of a Negro sorority, which were teachers, social workers, and so on, visited 8 African countries in the summer of 1962 at a cost of $1,798 per individual. They gained national prominence among Black Anglo-Saxon super citizens who hailed them as ambassadors of America in a very real sense, although the United States government had neglected to give them any financial backing. The African trip also had an inspirational purpose, said an item in the Courier. Their mere presence under these circumstances will be silent testimony to the economic and cultural status of American Negro womanhood and will present an image which is not too often shown to African people and should be an inspiration to them. So these women were seeking women empowerment, not Black empowerment. Remember that. All Negro group sponsored a 2-week visit of 12 women all of two of whom were white, to Russia. The stated purpose of the trip was to increase understanding between women of the two countries. This is a noble idea, but understanding could also be increased when white and Negro women in our own country sit down and talk together. A leading Negro model on a combination business and pleasure trip to Paris was pleased to see that many real African type models there. She spent most of her time apologizing for the lack of prominent Negro models in the United States. Supercitizens bestow democracy not only abroad but domestically as well. A noted social club in Oklahoma City was hailed for having chalked up a first with its International Party Day by virtue of inviting students from half a dozen foreign countries attending local colleges. When complimented on the success of the party, the president of the Super Citizen Club proclaimed that America must do more than preach democracy to foreign students studying within our shores if she is to win lasting friendship with their home countries. Warm, sincere hospitality is needed, and Negro groups must not be last to extend it. Negroes apparently are no longer going to merely sit back and preach democracy. Winning friends and influencing foreigners on behalf of the U.S., they are going to go out by God and practice democracy. They were even willing to tackle Khrushchev in a manner unknown to responsible leaders from Eisenhower to Johnson. For the super citizens, attacks took place behind the Khrushchev's back. Waiting until the Russian premier left the country, they then flexed their muscles and wrote him scorching open letters they knew he would never see. They told him frankly, "Good riddance to you. You didn't scare us one bit." Yet the pains they take to purchase the approbation of the white power structure so largely unrewarded. A leading jazz musician and band leader played a benefit concert at a white university in the South. Passing by surrounding Negro colleges and donating $3,700 of the $5,000 raised to that sponsoring white group. Later, he confidently stopped at a restaurant in search of food for himself and his band. They were not only refused service, but came close to being arrested when police cars arrived to investigate. In the end, they were obliged to make an unscheduled stop in Kansas City, hundreds of miles away, in order to eat. Yet, when a Negro is manifestly appalled by this kind of treatment, he is told that it isn't healthy to dislike white supremacists. Those who aren't bitter are regarded as adjusted, although psychoanalysts such as Anna Freud, author of The Ego and Its Mechanisms of Defense, have noticed that it is normal to display some bitterness in a bitter predicament. Super citizens, however, are more than not bitter. They also delight in the fact that they are not prejudiced, as if it would matter if they were. Even when they do take a notion to resist some incivility, They prefer to spout slogans like, let's agree without being disagreeable, in the effort to live up to this deception. They do more than conform, they oblige. Their efforts to adjust constitute a psychological denial of their objective maladjustment. They refuse to see the falsity of the pretense that they are not rejected. They constantly seek attachment to the status quo while ignoring its injustices. The super citizen is doubly lulled by token integration into vapid complacency and conspicuous conformity. When it all comes down to what it all comes down to basically is that one is adjusted if, except for his color, he is not much of a Negro, and except is spelled EXCEPT. So, with the exception of his color, he is not much of a Negro. Langston Hughes, creator of the Simple Speaks column, had Simple tell a super citizen that he was about the most un-Negro I know. You ought to be a race leader. White folks would love you. The Black Anglo-Saxon super citizen replied, I'm a liberal. I'm only trying to look on both sides of the question. This is an understatement, for Black Anglo-Saxons look on all sides in search of a view that is un-Negro. So the super citizens are very patriotic. They are the ones that you see at the game, tearing down stuff, being violent. The pioneers. In the Black Anglo-Saxon world, the term pioneer has two meanings. The first is in the sense of the Dar, the daughters of the American Revolution, type of overblown pride in being descended from America's first families. The other denotes a pioneer on the contemporary social scene, that is, the first or only Negro to be accepted by whites in some particular manner. True, almost all Negroes are justly pleased by such a breakthrough, motivated as they are by an altruistic feeling of pride and concern for justice. But the Black Anglo-Saxon pioneer's pleasure stems from the belief that he is different from other Negroes, as proven by his unique recognition by whites. So just by white folks knowing your name, this proves that they have a unique place. His policy of individual competition for the scarce slices of integration, rather than collective elevation and advancement, helps corrode the few bonds of group cohesion that may exist. For this type of pioneer, the greatest victory life can bring is such individual acceptance. Their profiles are continually gracing the front pages of Negro weeklies. Female pioneers will boast that they and their husbands were the only spook or Negro couple at the time some white private affair the night before. Black Anglo-Saxon pioneer teachers securing assistantships toward a master's degree at some white graduate school will place long write-ups in the local weeklies, claiming that they have been named to the faculty of the university. Fraternal groups gain a sense of self-importance from the fact that they were founded on some white campus and crow about the numbers of chapters flourishing on such campuses, omitting the fact that years of frenzied recruitment have failed to enlist a single white member. Failing to chalk up a first in an integrated capacity, some pioneers settle for first within the Negro race or community, although they would never say so in those terms. Instead, an early inhabitant of the Negro section of the city, for example, will be referred to as the first North Tulsan or the first South Sider. As I've said, while some Negroes suspect that the government's interest in space conceals a secret plan for whites to slip off one day, leaving the Negroes here, Black Anglo-Saxon pioneers are more inclined to take the view that if they can't beat the whites to the suburbs, by God, they'll beat them to the moon. When Gene, or Big Daddy Lipscomb, the late 288-pound tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers, was in Atlanta, Georgia, he told newsmen of his ambitions to be an astronaut, stating, "I sure would like to be the first guy to land up there on the moon." "What would you do, Big Daddy?" somebody asked. "Why, I'd look around, wave the American flag, claim the territory for America, and pick up a little glory for Big Daddy." Not all aspirants to firsthood are as willing to pay the price of accomplishment. Most are content to acquire their first by chance or superficial achievements. For example, when a party of pioneers went on a tour through the mystic caverns of Chattanooga, Tennessee, they came back giggling because the guide said that we were the first colored people to tour the caverns. They want to be the first and they want to be the only. Pioneers tour such places as northern Maine, where they can escape the presence of Negroes without leaving the country. They are also fond of visiting historical places in New England and Virginia, closing their eyes to what their own slave status would have been had they lived there. They seek to escape momentarily their real selves in order to assume fantasy selves, in which they become bona fide descendants of American or white pioneers. Some comb through historical documents in an attempt, usually unsuccessful, to trace their ancestral lineage back to one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Others keep pictures and scrapbooks of partly white ancestors who are palmed off as pure white individuals who passed for colored. Scores claim kinship to Thomas Jefferson, since they have heard that his racial identity is open to question. Others invent ancestors who were Indian chiefs, which is less traceable and, owing to the skin color, more plausible than white forebears. Paul Zuber, the civil rights attorney, in an editorial named "The Importance of Being a Negro," which appeared in the New York Amsterdam News for July 21st, 1962, wrote, "If these men sired as many Negroes as they claim by their illegitimate descendants, someone ought to find out what the tonic they use and bottle it. It would appear that they have Sirtuan and Geritol combined in the same bottle." But Attorney Zuber underestimates the pioneers' power of reincarnation. At their annual costume balls, they seek to reincarnate the era of George Washington, or other historical figures of the slave plantation period. To such affairs come hordes of pioneer ladies and gentlemen, appropriately attired in snow white wigs and cumbersome colonial dress. Nonetheless, they spent hours twisting the night away and doing their very modern dances. Your History, a weekly feature in Black Anglo-Saxon newspapers, contains items like one of the first mistresses of Louis XIV of France was a Negro. To quote singer Leslie Uggams, herself a part-time Black Anglo-Saxon. Many people who boast that they can trace their ancestors back for centuries but don't know where their kids were for dinner last night. In both categories of pioneers, something of a panic is beginning to develop as the shortage of fists and onlys increases. Consequently, pioneers are happy to be the second Negro, or even one of four. Future headlines will doubtless carry the story to the 14th Negro astronaut. As one commander observed, the U.S. seems determined to put a Negro on the moon, while they still can't get one into Mississippi in front of a Greyhound bus. The panic is also evident in the pioneers' frenzied search for historic roots. This is partly due to the petering out of old Black Anglo-Saxon pioneer stock. The offspring of free Negroes, that is, those Negroes of means who had never been slaves. A case history of this predicament is what the Comus Club of Brooklyn, the Black Anglo-Saxon counterpart of the Washington, D.C. Cosmos Club, the membership had been kept within the original families for years, many of whom delight in the fact that they are related to one another. The club began buying an apartment, but expanding membership soon led them in 1928 to purchase an entire building. Expanding membership means not only professional people and businessmen, but members of such traditionally upper class Black Anglo-Saxon occupational groups, such as the police force and civil service. Recently, they remodeled and redecorated the building, employing a butler and a full-time housekeeper. So they're just doing these things to impress white people. According to Negro journalist Dave Hepburn of the Amsterdam News, January 2nd, 1963, the club was started so that the founders could get together to play blackjack. Now, however, an unwritten Black Anglo-Saxon law prohibits the game on the premises. The Comus Club holds an annual ball, the policy being that the invitations are not transferable. Until recently, you had to virtually turn cartwheels to get one unless you were on the regular mailing list. Even these invitees were kept to a minimum, with each member receiving only 10 extra invitations. In 1962, the affair was held in the equally vulnerable St. George Hotel, where one of the wives engaged suites so they could dress on the spot. Pioneers gloated that as many as 4 generations of the same family were there, but the policy of exclusivity had begun to vanish. The event was almost a closed ball, yet 1,500 people attended. Pioneers without the pretense of highborn ancestors seek in their ways for a semblance of lineage. For instance, the publicity release of an all-girls school in the South hailed the number of granddaughters of the former graduates who were attending as freshmen. The passion for early American furniture, see the chapter on possessors, also enables pioneers to identify with the country's past without acknowledging that their forebears were field slaves. In some instances, the quest for prehistoric roots has led back to antiquity. More than a few have discarded the traditional men and women signs in their basement recreation rooms, substituting those signs for Adam and Eve. Pioneers tediously collect and relate scientific findings on the high rates of Negro ancestry among whites and the even greater amount of white ancestry among Negroes. They conclude that Negroes are amalgams of different amalgamations rather than pure Negroes. One Los Angeles pioneer, a beautician, even claimed distant kinship to Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett. During the heat of the Meredith crisis, she subsequently became a heroine and an object of devotion and curiosity among fellow pioneers. In general, definitions of Negro and American society, a child born out of wedlock, bears the stigma of illegitimacy, however harsh and hypocritical this may be. Black Anglo-Saxons, too, uphold this moral law when both parents are Negro. But if they can point to a white ancestor, they regard themselves as pedigreed. They proclaim that most of the white blood in the Negro race came from whites who could afford slaves and mistresses, hence, they were of the better class. In any case, if the Black Anglo-Saxon pioneers' pride in white ancestry were more widespread, the race might soon become geologically a race of bastards. This is what Ralph Ellison calls them in his prize-winning novel, The Invisible Man. And lastly, the cosmopolitans. In the feverish struggle to extend their cramped, restricted, and restrained identities over a universal plane, Black Anglo-Saxon cosmopolitans suffer vainglorious delusions of international acceptance. They furiously strive to uplift the whole world, everyone that is, but members of their own race. A young cosmopolitan coach in Chicago, for example, forsook a predominantly Negro high school to finance his own trip to Germany, where he could extend the art of square dancing to the Germans. This automatically made him a hero in the eyes of his Black Anglo-Saxon fellows. One well-known Negro expatriate, a famous entertainer, has adopted a girl and 10 boys. The girl is French Algerian, and 2 of the boys are French. The others are from Japan, Colombia, Finland, Africa, Venezuela, and Israel. Note the absence of an American Negro, although thousands cry out for adoption. This entertainer takes pains to hire enough tutors to rear them according to their native religions and national customs. For this, she is hailed by fellow cosmopolitans as an international star. Indeed, after giving up the latter, she finally had to return to the stage to meet the expenses of this kind of motherhood. When the National Council of Negro Women held its International Night in 1961, the year prior, most of the main speakers were foreign and white women. One Negro woman was called on, predictably, to interpret the role of the National Council of Negro Women in relation to the United Nations. Although cosmopolitans express sharp criticism of militant Negroes, even those who are backed against the ropes of integration battles can spare sympathy for well-to-do whites in the slightest distress. When Jacqueline Kennedy was visiting Italy, a cosmopolitan lady newspaper columnist mourned the fact that the First Lady's position would cause officials to protect her from the attentions of Italian men, in particular, the traditional gesture of pinching a beautiful woman on her protuberant hinder part on her booty. This was regarded as one of the prices of being the wife of the president, so she felt she had to take it. While aloof to many of the crucial injustices suffered by Negroes daily, the cosmopolitan is quick to express excessive sorrow at some wealthy white individual's tragedy, especially one prominent on the international scene. Examples are the disappearance of Rockefeller's son and de Gaulle's illness. Cosmopolitans seek to lend special grace and international charm to their coming out parties by not only presenting Negro youngsters of good family, but also flashing the spotlight on the daughters of foreign dignitaries. For example, at the affair described as the most brilliant international cotillion in the United States of America, they presented 45 American, Negro American that is, and 22 foreign debutantes. Although excluded from it themselves, they have taken on the task of presenting foreigners to society. Indeed, they likewise present white persons. One international cotillion presented 65 young damsels from 16 different countries, more than two-thirds of whom were Caucasian. Cosmopolitans generally call upon the wives of white politicians to act as honorary chairmen and co-chairmen of these affairs. Similarly, in 1960, a national cosmopolitan women's organization honored these four women of the year: Miss Daisy Lampkin, Courier Vice President, Lillian Smith, the novelist, Senator Helen Gahagan Douglas of California, and the late Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, all white women but one. Other cosmopolitans built fashion shows around such selections from the Orient to blend to the West. Some formed international and continental societies, aspiring also to such labels in their provisional lives. One calypso singer and balladeer who sings in French, Hebrew, German, and English wears silk suits cut in the extreme Italian style explaining that he always wanted to live like a continental. Female cosmopolitans go on European fashion safaris. Even the continental societies of the USA recently went international and negotiated for foreign chapters. They had achieved this status with the inclusion of one chapter outside of the United States. You want to know where that chapter was? It was in Bermuda. Many cosmopolitans display an affinity for the Oriental, strutting proudly about the floor-length dresses of Oriental influence. The Ebony Fashion Fair, with an Oriental flair, presented by the Continental Society of Washington, D.C., and by others across the country, was hailed as the only traveling high fashion show. It featured imports from Hong Kong and Tokyo. The moderator spent 6 weeks in the Orient collecting Japanese, Chinese, and Hawaiian costumes, although the Oriental flair was extended to include collections from designers in France and the rest of Western Europe. For social functions, clothing from abroad is most desirable. In one well-publicized wedding ceremony, the bride wore a unique bridal gown of white Japanese silk brocade. The material was authentic Japanese silk purchased at the famed Silk Mansion in Tokyo. After more than 500 guests were received at the ensuing reception, the Japanese atmosphere prevailed even at the honeymoon farewell when the couple departed for a Caribbean cruise with rice tossed that was flown in from Japan, and the bride was attired in a beige vicuna suit also made in Nippon, topped with a beige jeweled hat made in India. Membership in international Japanese study groups is common among cosmopolitans. So the cosmopolitans apparently revere Oriental culture, so much so that they'll do anything to be associated with it, spending any amount of money. That's money that they could be spending in the Black community. Am I right? In the case of debutantes, when no costume is available from abroad, the godmother of the young socialite may give her a dress designed by the designer of the Miss America gown. Do you know how much money that is? At conventions of the innumerable secret societies, women parade in Arabic costume. In the grand parades, which take place the day after the Oriental balls, they dress as sheiks and Arab chieftains, never merely ordinary Arabs. The appeal of the foreign may at times be even stronger than that of white America. This was evident when the White Southern Baptist Convention asked the Negro National Baptist Convention to reject invitations extended by foreign religious bodies, in this case, the Roman Catholic Church, and stay within the great family of Baptists. But the National Baptist, J.H. Jackson, said they would ignore the white church group's admonitions, which was a rare move indeed, and attend the Second Vatican Council in Rome. The cosmopolitan philosophy was also at the helm when Dr. Samuel D. Proctor, president of North Carolina A&T College, made a speech on our role in the brightening the dark places of the earth. He advised that the Negro must be concerned with what this world should have never become, color divided Black from white. His concern seems a bit belated. The doctor went on to add that he shuddered to think that such a world might develop and warned Negroes to prevent such a division. Similarly, The president of the National Baptist Convention, referred to above, warned solemnly that Negroes must accept in this life all men as brothers or get off the heaven bound special and take the other train which is bound for that other place down yonder. So accept integration or go to hell. That's what the religious brethren would say of the National Baptist Convention. The exaggerated emphasis of cosmopolitanism is also behind the furor over the ability of a Negro janitor to say good morning in 21 languages. Likewise, a Negro college professor was honored and presented with a scroll for completing a course in Buddhism while a U.S. cultural attaché in Burma. The Peace Corps official reports that one of the most rewarding accomplishments of many Southern Negro college volunteers was their ability to master the very difficult tonal language of Thailand. Like the exiles, cosmopolitans often give their children French and Spanish names. You'll find Juanita Jackson or Yvonne Jeanette Jones. It was suggested to a Chicago couple unable to choose between a French and a Spanish name that they give the child an African one. They replied indignantly that that would be going too far out. The Cosmopolitan International set consists of mainly a school of school teachers returned from exchange program appointments or wives who have resided with husbands stationed overseas. More than one summer spent outside the United States gains them the title of globetrotter or world traveler. Lesser cosmopolitans going abroad usually travel in package tours. These may include seeing a bit of everything there is to see in Europe and being welcomed at fashionable hotels, an agreeable change from the attitude of such hotels in their own country. The cosmopolitan travels across the Isle of Capri up to the Swiss Alps, strolls through the ruins of Pompeii, browses among the art galleries of Florence, finds romance in Venice, or reports just having a ball on the blue Mediterranean. Europe, of course, is the favorite destination of the cosmopolitan globetrotters. All Black Anglo-Saxons, whether or not they have ever been to Europe, are hopelessly in love with it. Ashamed of their ancestral ties to Africa, they yearn for the continent as a symbolic alternative. The Jews may have Israel, the Italians Italy, the Irish Ireland, the Germans Germany, but the Black Anglo-Saxons, all of them have Europe. Europe may not be their mother country, but it is very much their stepmother country. Africa, on the other hand, is studiously ignored. One prominent socialite in introducing ambassadors goes so far as to feign ignorance in the pronunciation of Ghana. However, some prestige does accrue to the cosmopolitan who goes to Africa as an emissary of the U.S. government or who is sent there as a missionary by white religious bodies. More recently, Egypt and the Holy Land have also become into favor. Less wealthy cosmopolitans take off on imaginary flights without leaving the ground. In Atlanta, Georgia, a social club fulfilled the wishes of its members to build castles in Spain by sponsoring an imaginary trip to that romantic country. The living room of the southern host became the parlor in Seville. with Latin music in the background and Spanish card games and dominoes. Another group stages a series of evenings in Hawaii, with cocktails served on the patio and in the flower garden of a member's home. Members attend these evenings in Hawaiian dress, with leis around their necks and flowers in their hair like real Hawaiians. Three more fortunate lady cosmopolitans took a 10-day flight to Hawaii, later describing their memorable experiences chatting with a couple of Hawaiian belles and watching the hula performed by real Hawaiians. Those unable to go to Europe form intercultural fellowship clubs and present international cotillions, especially sponsored by a white-owned beer company or soft drink company. The firm's first token Negro salesman, an individual of impressive stature in the Black Anglo-Saxon world, is generally accorded with the honor of crowning Miss International Cotillion. Predictable, despite all the good families competing for this coveted beauty title, a recent winner was the daughter of a West Indian bank vault attendant. So they didn't even elect a Black person. The forecast says when the missionaries and their military don't work, they send the clones to try to convince them or to fight other Black people on their behalf. Absolutely. Absolutely, they do. Because they're trying everything they can to infiltrate your society. The first integration or the first attempts at integration are sexual and social. And then they move on to more harsher forms of integration. And integration is death. Integration and amalgamation are forms of death because if you integrate into their societies, you won't be Black anymore. And that's what they want. A leading group of cosmopolitan leaders recently formed a Gandhi Society for Human Rights, thus seeking by suggestion to attribute the Negro's passive resistance movement to Gandhi, although it differs in many respects from his philosophy. This agrees by implication with the white supremacists who say that Negroes don't have enough native sense to organize their own rebellion. Black Anglo-Saxons are prominent in interracial and diplomatic circles, which usually means those who attend charitable pay affairs at an embassy, rank high in cosmopolitan echelons. As invitation to a diplomatic party or one of the more exclusive embassy affairs is highly coveted. A school teacher in Chicago traveled to Jamaica with a party of cosmopolitans for the sole purpose of attending that country's independence celebration. To her dismay, she was not invited to a single affair, although this was her 6th trip to Jamaica. Such treatment as that accorded the school teacher need not, however, be a block to becoming international. There is also internationalism in reverse. Organizations with chapters or even one or more delegates or guests in countries such as Liberia or Sierra Leone qualify for the international label. Further, although cosmopolitans generally are not eager for links to Africa, they do occasionally sponsor an affair in honor of an African ambassador. This is usually a last attempt at foreignness or recognition as part of Embassy Row. Naturally, more prestige accrues if the foreign visitor hails from a non-Negro land. Such individuals are quickly recruited as guests of honor for the Oriental evenings previously referred to. A National Women's Society fun night recently consisted of a Saturday night party where the motif was internationalism and the home of the host was renamed the United Nations. On the central dining room table was a roast pig, behind which were miniature flags of all the United Nations member nations. Each hostess represented a different country and wore its typical dress. While the organist played a medley of native airs, the foreign hostesses were presented to the guests. They then proceeded to distribute souvenirs from their native countries, which they had never visited, because these are the cosmopolitans pretending to do something that they've never done, pretending to be from these foreign countries. One group of nationwide repute presented in 1963 a brotherhood of festival food. Its purpose was to share in creating symbols of brotherhood through the medium of food and to break bread together. It was reported that colorful displays of food from Israel, Nigeria, Ceylon, Germany, the Ivory Coast, the Netherlands, India, the Philippines, Jamaica, Canada, Belgium, and Sierra Leone clashed in a harmonious array of designs tempting to the palate. In such fantasies, cosmopolitans seek to forget themselves and their true identities. Ironically, by evading and neglecting the advancement of their own race, they bar the only path open to true universal acceptance. So, as you can see, these three different types of people, whether it's the super citizen, the pioneer, or the cosmopolitan, they are all looking to white society for something, for some type of acknowledgement, for some type of admiration. They will spend unwieldy amounts of money in an attempt to get white acceptance just because they think that white people are paying attention, not recognizing that these people just want their money. All right, guys, that's it for this evening. I'll be back tomorrow with the conclusions and the epilogue starting on page 129. And then we're going to look for another book to read. I thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you, the forecast. I appreciate you, KW Don 7 and Anthony McPhail, all for being here. I know that Raw is listening with the elders. I know that Brother Bakari is listening. I know that the Daycare Ladies Network staff are listening. I know that the staff from Jesse's Kids are listening. And I know that the staff from the Anthony Adrian Academy are listening. I also know that Jijen is listening. So is Denial, and so many others. And you, yes, even you, are listening tonight. I thank you for tuning in, and I will see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks, guys. Peace.